In this episode, we will discuss the exalted mysteries of Day 1 of creation, diving deep into the earliest recorded part of the book of Genesis. The information that you will hear covered in this piece comes from the book of Genesis, the book of Revelation, the visions of mystic Anne Catherine Emmerich, and mostly from the Mystical City of God. The Mystical City of God is a book written by Maria of Ágreda in years 1655 to 1665. The book consists of 4 volumes: the Conception, the Incarnation, the Transfixion, and the Coronation. The book describes immeasurable mysteries of God, Jesus Christ, and the life of the Virgin Mary, as directed by our Creator and dictated to Maria of Ágreda by the Holy Virgin Mary through years of divine contemplations and experiences. God revealed that the instructions, mysteries, and doctrine contained in the mystical city of God were a remedy for the human race for not subjecting itself to His divine light. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, we read, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day." Before God created heaven and earth, the Most High wished to provide for them and create that which is necessary for the attainment of their end and for living in the manner ordained for them. Before creating intellectual and rational creatures, God created heaven for both angels and mankind. The heavens publish the glory of the Lord, because in them is deposited the predestined reward of the just. God then called creatures into existence, giving them a being of their own, that He might rejoice in the works of His own hands. God created the earth as a place of pilgrimage for mortals to attain what God created in heaven. The earthly firmament announces the glory of the works of God's hands, and that there would be creatures and men to inhabit the earth, and that men should journey upon it to their Creator. In these introductory words of the earth, Moses says that it was without form and void, which he does not say of the heavens, for God had created the angels at the instant indicated by the words of Moses, "Let there be light." And light was made. So on the first day, which corresponds to Sunday, God created the angels. God made material light and the intellectual or angelic lights. The metaphor of light was very appropriate to signify the angelic nature and mysticality, the light of their science and grace, with which they were endowed at their creation. God created the earth conjointly with the heavens to call into existence hell in its center. At the instant of earth's creation, there were left in the interior of that globe spacious and wide cavities, which were suitable for hell. In hell was created material fire and other requisites, which now serve for the punishment of the damned. The Lord was presently to divide the light from the darkness, and to call the light day and the darkness night. And this did happen, not only in regard to the natural night and day, but in regard to the good and bad angels. For to the good He gave the eternal light of His vision, and called it day, the eternal day, and to the bad the night of sin, casting them into the eternal darkness of hell. The angels were created in the empyrean heavens, and in the state of grace by which they might be first to merit the reward of glory. For although the angels were in the midst of glory, the divinity itself was not to be made manifest to them face to face and unveiled, until they should have merited such a favor by obeying his divine will. The holy angels, as well as the bad ones, remained only a very short time in the state of probation, for their creation, probation, and its result were three distinct instants or moments separated by short intermissions. First, the angels were all created, coming into existence as most beautiful and perfect creatures, endowed with graces and gifts. Then followed a short pause, during which the will of the Creator was propounded and intimated, and the law and command was given to them, to acknowledge him as their Maker and Supreme Lord, and to fulfill the end for which they had been created. With the interposition of some intervals of time, God proposed to them the good and the bad, truth and falsehood, justice and injustice, divine grace and friendship, as opposed to sin and enmity of God. The angels were enabled to see eternal reward and eternal punishment for not adhering to the commands given to them by God. The angels were able to see the perdition of Lucifer and of all those that would follow him. His Majesty showed them hell and its pains. They saw it all, so that before falling from grace, they were clearly aware of the place of their chastisement. Although the angels did not know in the same manner the reward of glory, they had of it other knowledge, and they had the manifest and express promise of the Lord the Most High, had therefore justified his cause, and proceeded with the greatest of equity and justice. But all this goodness and equity did not suffice to restrain Lucifer and his followers, because they were chastised in their stubbornness. During this pause, instant, or interval, Saint Michael and his angels fought a great battle with the dragon. The good angels, persevering in grace, merited eternal happiness, and the disobedient ones, rebelling against God, merited the punishment, and were hurled into the depths of the hellish caverns, which they now suffer. All this was consummated in the third instant, and thus it became truly manifest that no being outside of God himself is impeccable by nature, since the angel Lucifer, who had held such an exalted position, and was adorned with so many great gifts of knowledge and grace, nevertheless sinned and was lost. God in his providence decided to show the angels, immediately after their creation, and before they could incline to diverse ends, the purpose for which he had created them with such an exalted and perfect nature. They received a more explicit intelligence of the being of God, one in substance, trine in person, and that they were commanded, in our way of understanding, to 1. Adore and reverence him as their Creator and highest Lord, infinite in his essence and attributes. All subjected themselves to this command and obeyed it, but with a certain difference. Some, that is, the good angels, obeyed through love and on account of the justice of it, offering their love and good will, freely admitting and believing what was above their intelligence, and obeying with joy. Lucifer, on the other hand, submitted himself, because the opposite seemed to him impossible. He did not obey the command of God with perfect charity, for he, as it were, was divided in his will between himself and the infallible truth of the Lord. In consequence it happened that the precept appeared to him in a measure difficult and violent, and his fulfilling of it was wanting in love, and in the desire to do justice. Thus he exposed himself beforehand to the danger of not persevering. Although grace did not leave him on account of this remissiveness and slowness in the accomplishment of these first acts, nevertheless his bad disposition began with them, for there remained with him a certain weakness and laxity of virtue and spirit, and the perfection of his nature did not shine forth as it should. I do not say that he sinned, mortally or even venially, at this time, since he fulfilled the precept of God, but this fulfillment was remiss and imperfect, springing more from a sense of overwhelming compulsion than from a loving willingness to obey. Thus, he put himself in danger of falling. In the second place, the angels were informed that God was to create a human nature and reasoning creatures, human beings, lower than the angels, in order that these creatures, too, should love, fear, and reverence God as their author and eternal good. The angels were informed that these creatures were to stand in high favor with God, and that the second person of the blessed Trinity, the Word, which they were given knowledge and enlightenment upon, was to become incarnate and assume the creature's nature, raising its nature to the hypostatic union and to divine personality, and that the angels were to acknowledge him as their head, not only as God, but as God and man, adoring him and reverencing him as God-man. Moreover, these same angels were to be his inferiors in dignity and grace, and were to be his servants. God gave them an intelligence of the propriety and equity of the justice and reasonableness of such a position. For the acceptation of the merits foreseen of this man-God was exhibited to the angels as the source of the grace which the angels now possessed, and of the glory which the angels were to obtain in heaven. The angels understood also that they themselves had been, and all the rest of the creatures should be, created for his glory, and that he was to be their head. All those that were capable of knowing and enjoying God were to be the people of the Son of God, to know and reverence him as their chief. These commands were at once given to the angels. When it was revealed to the angels that they would have to obey the incarnate Word, a third precept was given them by God, namely, that they were to admit as a superior, conjointly with him, a woman, in whose womb the only begotten of the Father was to assume flesh, and that this woman was to be the queen of all the creatures. To this command all the obedient and holy angels submitted themselves and gave their full assent and acknowledgment with a humble and loving subjection of the divine will. The good angels, by obeying this command of the Lord, with still increasing and more alert humility, freely subjected themselves, praising the power and the mysteries of the Most High. The Almighty at this juncture worked another wonderful mystery. Having given all the angels a sufficiently clear intelligence of the great mystery of the hypostatic union, he showed them the image of the most holy Virgin by means of an imaginary vision. They were shown the perfection of the human nature and the revelation of an image representing the most perfect woman, in whom the almighty arm of the Most High would work more wonderfully than in all the rest of the creatures. For therein he was to deposit the graces and gifts of his right hand in a higher and more eminent manner. The sign or vision of the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of the Incarnate Word was made known and manifest to all the angels, good and bad. The sign is spoken of by the evangelist in Revelation 12:1. And a great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. The good angels at the sign of it broke forth in admiration and in canticles of praise, and from that time on began to defend the honor of the God incarnate and of his holy mother, being armed with ardent zeal and with the invincible shield of that vision. The dragon and his allies, on the contrary, conceived implacable hatred and fury against Christ and his holy mother. Lucifer, full of envy and pride, resisted and induced his followers to resist likewise, as they in reality did, preferring to follow him and disobey the divine command. This wicked prince persuaded them that he would be their chief, and that he would set up a government, independent and separate from Christ. So great was the blindness which envy and pride could cause in an angel, and so pernicious was the infection, that the contagion of sin spread among innumerable other angels. Lucifer, however, and his confederates rose to a higher pitch of pride and boastful insolence. In disorderly fury, Lucifer aspired to be himself the head of all the human race and of all the angelic orders, and if there was to be a hypostatic union, he demanded that it be consummated in him. The degree constituting Lucifer inferior to the mother of the incarnate Word he opposed with horrible blasphemies. Turning against the author of these great wonders in unbridled indignation, and calling upon the other angels, he exhorted them, saying, "Unjust are these command, and injury is done to my greatness. This human nature which thou, Lord, lookest upon with so much love, and which thou favorest so highly, I will persecute and destroy. To this end I will direct all my power and all my aspirations, and this woman, mother of the Word, I will hurl from the position in which thou hast proposed to place her, and at my hands the plan which thou settest up shall come to naught." The proud boast of Lucifer so aroused the indignation of the Lord that in order to humble it, he spoke to Lucifer, "This woman, whom thou refusest to honor, shall crush thy head, and by her shalt thou be vanquished and annihilated. And if through thy pride death enters into the world, life and salvation of mortals shall enter through the humility of this woman. Those that are of the nature and likeness of that man and woman shall enjoy the gifts and the crowns which thou and thy followers have lost." To all this the dragon, filled with indignation against whatever he understood of the divine will and decrees, answered only with pride, and by threatening destruction to the whole human race. For the obedient and holy angels, filled with ardent desire of hastening the glory of the Most High, and the honor of the incarnate Word, asked permission and, as it were, the consent of God to resist and contradict the dragon, and the permission was granted. The good angel saw the just indignation of the Most High against Lucifer and his apostates, and they combated them with the arms of the understanding, reason, and truth. Now the sign appeared really in the heavens by divine disposition, and was shown to the good and the bad angels, in order that seeing it, they might subject their will to the pleasure and the commands of God. It was as if it were a mirror of the wonderful perfection of the handiwork of God in creating human nature. Although he had already revealed this perfection to the angels in making known to them the mystery of the hypostatic union, yet he wished to reveal it to them also in a different manner, by showing it to them in a mere creature, the most perfect and holy, which, next to the humanity of our Lord, he was to create. It was also a sign for the assurance of the good angels and for confusion of the bad, since it manifested to them that in spite of the offense which was committed, God would not let the decree of creating man be unfulfilled, and that the incarnate Word and this woman, his mother, would please him infinitely more than the disobedient angels could ever displease him. This sign was also like the rainbow, which appeared after the flood in the clouds of heaven, as a guarantee that even if men should sin like the angels and become disobedient, they were not to be punished like the angels without remission, but would be furnished with salutary medicine and a remedy by this wonderful sign. It was as if God said to the angels, I will not chastise in the same way the other creatures which I call into my existence, because this woman, in whom my only begotten is to assume flesh, belongs to that race. My Son shall be the restorer of friendship and the pacifier of my justice. He shall open the way to the felicity which sin would close. In further testimony of this, after the punishment of the disobedient angels, God made use of the sign in order to show that his anger, which the pride of Lucifer had occasioned, was appeased and placated. God rejoiced in the presence of the queen thus represented in that image. He gave the angels to understand that through Christ and his mother, he would now divert upon men the grace which the apostates had lost through their rebellion. Seeing this woman so full of clemency, appearing to them as a sign of peace, they understood at once that the decree of punishment was not issued against them, since they had obeyed the precepts of the Lord and his divine will. Much of the mysteries and sacraments of the Incarnation and those of the Church militant and its members were made manifest to them in this sign. They understood also that they were to assist and help the human race by watching over men and women, by defending them against their enemies, and by leading them to eternal felicity. They saw that they themselves would owe their felicity to the merits of the incarnate Word, and that the Creator had preserved them also in grace through Christ preordained in the divine mind. Just as all this was a great joy and happiness for the good angels, so it was great torment for the evil spirits. It was to the latter a part and the beginning of their punishment, for they saw at once that having failed to profit by this sign, they were to be conquered and crushed by it. All these mysteries and many others, which I cannot explain, the evangelist wished to comprehend in this chapter, and include in that great sign, although for us it will remain obscure and enigmatic until the proper time arrives. When the Lord had manifested these things to the good and to the bad angels, the holy Prince Michael and his companions, with the permission of God, gave battle to the dragon and his followers. And a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. Revelation chapter 12, 7-8. Now it was a wonderful battle, for the battle was fought with the understanding and the will. Saint Michael, burning with zeal for the honor of God and armed with divine power and with his own humility, resisted the arrogant pride of the dragon, saying, Worthy is the highest of honor, praise, and reverence, and of being loved, feared, and obeyed by all creation. He is mighty to work whatever he desires. He that is increate and without dependence on any other being, cannot seek anything that is not most just. To us he gave grace such as we have, creating us and forming us out of nothing. He can create other beings, as many and in what manner he pleases. It is reasonable that we, submissive and prostrate in his presence, adore his majesty in kingly grandeur. Come then, ye angels, follow me, let us adore him, and extol his admirable and secret judgments, his most perfect and holy works. God is most exalted and above all creatures, and he would not be the Most High if we could attain or comprehend his great works. Infinite he is in wisdom and goodness, rich in the treasures of his benefits. As Lord of all and needing none, he can distribute them to whomever he wishes, and he cannot err in the selection. He can love and confer his favor to whomever he chooses, and he can love whom he likes. He can raise up, create, and enrich according as is his good pleasure. In all things he will be wise, holy, and irresistible. Let us adore and thank him for the wonderful work of the incarnation which he has decreed, and for his favors to his people, and for its restoration to grace after its fall. Let us adore this person, endowed with the human and the divine nature. Let us reverence it and accept it as our head. Let us confess that he is worthy of all glory, praise, and magnificence, and as the author of grace, let us give him glory and acknowledge his power and divinity. With such arms Saint Michael and his angels gave battle, fighting as it were with the powerful rays of truth against the dragon and his followers, who on their hand made use of blasphemies. Lucifer, at the sight of the holy prince, not being able to resist, was torn with interior rage and sought to fly from his torments. It was the will of God, however, that Lucifer should not only be punished, but also conquered, in order that by his fall he might know the truth and power of God. Nevertheless, Lucifer blasphemed and cried out, "Unjust is God in raising the human nature above the angelic. I am the most exalted and beautiful angel, and the triumph belongs to me. It is I who am to place my throne above the stars, and who shall be like unto the highest. I will subject myself to no one of an inferior nature, and I will not consent that anyone take precedence of me or be greater than I." Saint Michael responded to Lucifer's blasphemy, saying, "Who is there like unto the Lord, who dwells in the heaven, or who to compare himself to him? Be silent, enemy, cease thy dreadful blasphemies, and since iniquity has taken possession of thee, depart from our midst, wretch, and be hurled in thy blind ignorance and wickedness into the dark night and chaos of the infernal pains. But let us, O spirits of the Lord, honor and reverence this blessed woman, who is to give human flesh to the eternal Word, and let us recognize her as our Queen and Lady." The great sign of the woman served the good angels as a shield and as arms of battle against the evil ones. For at the sight of it, all the evil angels' power of reasoning weakened, and was brought to confusion and silence, since they could not endure the mysteries and sacraments contained in this sign. And just as by divine power this mysterious sign appeared, so also now the other figure or sign of the dragon appeared, in order that thus transformed he might be ignominiously hurled from heaven amid the fright and terror of his followers, and amid the astonishment of the holy angels. All this was the effect of this new manifestation of the justice and power of God. For through the sins which these disgraced angels had committed, they made themselves unworthy to the eternal vision and company of the Lord. Their memory was blotted out from his mind, where they had been written by the excellences and graces of the nature given to them. Having lost the right to the places which had been reserved for them, if they had obeyed, it passed over to mankind. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. The holy Prince Michael hurled from heaven the dragon Lucifer with the invincible battle cry, "Who is like unto God?" So powerful was this cry that it sufficed to precipitate that proud giant and all his hosts to the earth, and cast him in dreadful ignominy to the center of the earth. From that time he began to be called dragon, serpent, devil, and Satan, imposed upon him by the holy archangel in that battle as a testimony of his iniquity and malice. Deprived of the happiness and honor of which he had become unworthy, he was despoiled also of his names and honorable titles, acquiring in their stead such as designate his ignominy. The wicked plans which he proposed and enjoined upon his confederates, namely, that they should deceive and pervert all those that live in the world, manifest sufficiently his wickedness. He therefore, who intended to scourge the nations, was consigned to hellish regions, as Isaiah says, to the profound abyss, and his cadaver was delivered to the moth and the worm of his own bad conscience. Thus was fulfilled in Lucifer all that the prophet says. When the heavens had been cleared of all the bad angels, and the divinity had been unveiled to the good and the obedient, when they were already admitted into glory, and the bad ones chastised, then happened what the evangelist farther says. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our Lord, and the power of his Christ, because the accuser of our brethren is cast forth, who accused them before our God day and night. This voice which the evangelist heard was that of the Word, and all the holy angels heard and listened to it. Its echoes reverberated through the infernal regions and filled with trembling and fear the demons. They did not, however, understand its mystery in full, but only so much of it as the Most High chose to manifest to them for their greater affliction and punishment. It was the voice of the Son, who in the name of his humanity, which he was to assume, was asking the Eternal Father that the salvation, power, and kingdom of his majesty and the reign of Christ might begin, since the accuser of the brethren of the same Christ our Lord, that is, of man, had been cast out. It was like a petition before the throne of the most holy Trinity, that the salvation and power and the mysteries of the redemption and incarnation be put into execution. He asked that it be done so much the sooner, as Lucifer, being filled with fury, envy, and wrath against the human nature, which the Word was to assume, was now infesting the earth. Full of love and compassion, the Word calls men his brethren. This was the first time in which the Word, in the name of his humanity, interceded for men before the divinity, and in which, according to our mode of conceiving such things, the Eternal Father conferred with the other persons of the Blessed Trinity in regard to this petition. The Eternal Father also partly revealed to the holy angels the decree of this divine consistory, saying, Lucifer has raised the banner of pride and sin, and will persecute, with all his malice, the whole human race. With cunning he will pervert many men, availing himself of their own passions for their destruction. In the blindness of sin and vice men will prevaricate, heedless of danger. But his lying pride, his sins and vices, are infinitely distant from our nature and wishes. We will therefore bring out the triumph of virtue and sanctity. For this purpose the second person will assume human nature. He will exalt and teach humility, obedience, and all the virtues, and thus will secure the salvation of mortals. Being true God, he will become humble and submissive. He will be the just man, the model, and the teacher of all virtues. This voice, which contains the mysteries hidden since the constitution of the world and manifested by the doctrine and the life of Jesus Christ, issued forth from the throne and imported more than can be explained. God spoke of the reward for mankind in persevering on earth against the fallen angels, saying that the most humble and virtuous of mankind afterwards shall be ranked with the angelic spirits, our sons, and they will enjoy the seats and crowns which the unfortunate and unhappy apostates have lost. The stubborn and the proud shall be condemned to eternal death, where they will recognize their foolish proceedings and their perverseness. On account of these mysteries, the sacred text in Revelation chapter 12, verse 12 adds, "Therefore rejoice, O heaven, and you that dwell therein. Rejoice, because thou art to be the dwelling place of the just, and of their chief, Jesus Christ, and his most holy mother. Rejoice, O heaven, because of all the material and inanimate creatures none obtained a better lot, for thou art to be the house of God, who will endure through the eternal ages, and thou art to receive as thy queen the most pure and most holy creature, that emanated from the power of the Most High. Therefore rejoice, heaven and all that dwell therein, ye angels and ye just, since you are to be the companions and ministers of the Son of the Eternal Father and of his Mother, and you are to be parts of that mystical body, whose head is Christ himself. Rejoice, ye holy angels, because ministering to them and serving them by your defense and custody, you increase your accidental joy. Let the holy archangel Michael, the prince of the celestial hosts, rejoice in particular, because he defended in battle the glory of the Most High and his adorable mysteries, and because he is also to be the minister of the incarnation of the Word, and in particular a witness of all its effects to the end. Let all Archangel Michael's allies and all the defenders of Jesus Christ and his mother rejoice, since during their ministry they do not lose the joys of essential glory already their own. On account of such divine sacraments, let the heavens rejoice. When the ancient serpent saw the most unhappy place and state to which he had fallen, and that he was hurled from the empyrean heaven, he broke out in so much the greater rage and envy, like a wild beast tearing its own entrails. As soon as Lucifer with his followers entered hell, they assembled a general council. During this time Lucifer exerted all his astuteness and diabolical malice in conferring with the demons and concocting plans to offend God so much the more deeply, and to obtain revenge for the chastisement to which he had been subjected. They came to the conclusion and resolved that the greatest vengeance and injury against God would be to impede the effects of the love which they knew God bore toward mankind. This they hoped to attain by deceiving men and persuading them, or even, as far as possible, compelling them to neglect the friendship of God, to be ungrateful toward him, and to rebel against his will. Thus it is said by the evangelists in Revelation 12:12, But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. Against the mother of the Word incarnate he conceives such a furious rage as no human tongue or intelligence can ever describe or understand. But to a certain extent this anger can be surmised from that which followed immediately after that dragon found himself hurled with his host to the infernal regions. For during the whole first week of the creation of the world and its contents, Lucifer and the demons were occupied in machinations and projects of wickedness against the Word, who was to become incarnate, and against the woman, of whom he was to be born and made man. For it is written, "And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had borne the male child." Revelation 12:13. On the first day, which corresponds to Sunday, were created the angels. Laws and precepts were given to them for the guidance of their actions. The bad ones disobeyed and transgressed the mandates of the Lord. By divine providence and disposition, then succeeded the events which have been discussed here, up to the morning of the second day, corresponding to Monday. The duration of these days corresponds to the small periods or delays which intervene between their creation, activity, contest, and fall, or glorification. Thank you for watching the video on day 1 of the creation. If you found this video insightful or interesting, then consider liking it or sharing it with somebody. Please stay tuned for more videos like this one.